You've heard it before. Someone raises an alarm. Something dark, something hidden, something the powerful don't want you to know. And the immediate response is laughter. Dismissal. The word conspiracy theorist gets dropped like a hammer, and that's usually the end of the conversation. But here's what nobody talks about. Sometimes they're right. Not the flat earthers, not the people who think the moon is a hologram. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about claims that were ridiculed, suppressed, and buried. Claims that were later confirmed by government documents, congressional hearings, court rulings, and mainstream headlines. What you're about to hear isn't speculation. Every theory we cover today has since been proven, admitted, or officially acknowledged. And when you see the pattern, when you see how many times the crazy version turned out to be closer to the truth than the official story, you have to ask yourself a serious question. How many of today's conspiracy theories are tomorrow's confirmed facts? Let's find out. For years, people whispered about a CIA program that secretly dosed American and Canadian citizens with LSD and other psychedelic drugs without their consent, in an effort to develop mind control techniques. The stated goal was to weaponize the human mind, to create a programmable person, a soldier who couldn't be broken under interrogation, a sleeper agent who didn't even know what they were. When this idea circulated in the 1950s and early 60s, anyone who talked about it was dismissed as paranoid, delusional, obviously suffering from some kind of mental illness if they believed their own government would do that. Here's what actually happened. The program was called MK Ultra. It ran from 1953 to 1973. It was sanctioned by the CIA director. It involved at least 150 human research projects conducted at 80 institutions, universities, hospitals, prisons, and mental health facilities across the United States and Canada. Participants included mental patients, prisoners, drug addicts, and sex workers, populations who were considered expendable and unlikely to be believed if they spoke up. Some subjects were told they were receiving treatment. Others were given substances secretly slipped into their food and drinks. In one particularly disturbing sub-project, a CIA safe house in San Francisco was set up to observe the effects of LSD on men lured there by sex workers who were also on the CIA payroll. Researchers watched through one-way mirrors while the men were unknowingly drugged. They called it Operation Midnight Climax. The program produced no functional mind control. What it did produce was trauma, psychosis, and in at least one documented case, death. Frank Olson, a U.S. Army biochemist, was secretly dosed with LSD during a CIA meeting in 1953. Days later, he fell from a hotel window in New York City. His death was ruled a suicide. His family spent decades fighting to have it reclassified. In 1994, his body was exhumed. A forensic pathologist found evidence consistent with blunt force trauma to the head before the fall. MK-Ultra was only exposed because of a clerical error. When CIA Director Richard Helms ordered all MK-Ultra files destroyed in 1973, most were. But roughly 20,000 documents had been misfiled in a records facility and survived. They were discovered during a FOIA request in 1977. Congressional hearings followed. The program was confirmed. The official story, "Your government would never do that," turned out to be a lie. Fast forward to the early 2000s. In the wake of 9/11, there were rumblings. Journalists writing about secret rooms inside AT&T switching facilities. whistleblowers claiming the NSA had built a backdoor into America's telecommunications infrastructure. That the government wasn't just monitoring suspected terrorists, they were collecting data on everyone. The response from officialdom was swift and confident. In 2013, just months before the story broke wide open, Director of National Intelligence James Clapper was asked directly by Senator Ron Wyden whether the NSA collected data on millions of Americans. His answer, no, not wittingly. That was a lie. He said it under oath to the United States Senate. In June 2013, Edward Snowden, an NSA contractor, released a cache of classified documents to journalists Glenn Greenwald and Laura Poitras. What those documents revealed shattered the official narrative completely. The NSA had built a program called PRISM that gave it direct access to the servers of 9 major technology companies: Microsoft, Yahoo, Google, Facebook, Paltalk, YouTube, Skype, AOL, and Apple. Under PRISM, the government could extract emails, chat logs, video and voice calls, photos, stored data, file transfers, video conferencing, and login activity. A separate program, called Muscular, tapped the fiber optic cables connecting Google and Yahoo's internal data centers, intercepting data before it could be encrypted. The NSA was essentially reading corporate communications from the inside. And then there was Section 215 of the Patriot Act, the legal mechanism used to compel phone companies like Verizon to hand over the metadata of every single call made on their network. Not just calls involving suspects, every call, every day, in bulk. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, a secret court operating without public oversight, had been approving these collection programs on a mass scale for years. When the story broke, officials insisted the programs were legal, necessary, and carefully overseen. None of those reassurances addressed the central fact. The people who said the government was collecting mass surveillance data on American citizens were right. And the Director of National Intelligence lied to Congress about it and faced no criminal consequences. This next one isn't a government conspiracy. It's a corporate one. And it's important because it established a template that would be used again and is still being used today. For decades, the American tobacco industry maintained publicly, officially, and loudly that there was no proven link between smoking and cancer. They funded their own research. They produced their own scientists. They ran advertising campaigns featuring doctors endorsing cigarettes. When studies began to accumulate showing clear connections between smoking and lung cancer, the industry's response was to manufacture doubt. This wasn't a defensive posture. It was a strategy. Internal documents, eventually unsealed through litigation, revealed that tobacco companies had known about the carcinogenic properties of cigarettes since at least the 1950s. Research conducted by the industry's own scientists for internal use only confirmed the cancer link. Those findings were buried, suppressed, and contradicted by public-facing communications designed to confuse the issue. In a famous 1969 internal memo from Brown and Amp, Williamson, a tobacco executive, wrote that doubt was their product because it was the best means of competing with the body of fact that existed in the mind of the general public. That sentence became one of the most studied examples of deliberate disinformation in corporate history. In 1998, the major tobacco companies settled with 46 U.S. states for a combined $206 billion in damages. Millions of internal documents were released. They confirmed everything that critics and health advocates had been saying for decades, and everything the industry had denied. The playbook used by tobacco, funding counter-research, weaponizing scientific uncertainty, attacking critics' credibility, delaying regulatory action, has since been identified in industries ranging from fossil fuels to pharmaceutical companies to the sugar industry. The people who said tobacco companies were hiding the truth were not conspiracy theorists. They were correct. On August 4, 1964, President Lyndon Johnson went on national television to announce that U.S. naval forces had been attacked, for the second time in 2 days, by North Vietnamese torpedo boats in the Gulf of Tonkin. Congress responded by passing the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, granting Johnson essentially unlimited authority to escalate military operations in Vietnam. Over the next decade, approximately 58,000 Americans would die in that war. Estimates of Vietnamese dead, military and civilian, range from 1 to 3 million. The August 4th attack never happened. This had been suspected for years. Veterans, journalists, historians, and anti-war activists all raised questions about the incident. The official story had inconsistencies. The intelligence was murky. The administration had been looking for a pretext to escalate. In 2005, the National Security Agency declassified a previously secret internal study written by NSA historian Robert Hanyok. It had been completed in 2001, but suppressed for 4 years. The Hanyok report concluded that NSA signals intelligence had been selectively reported and in some cases altered to make it appear that an attack had occurred on August the 4th when the actual signals data showed it had not. Robert McNamara, who was Secretary of Defense at the time and one of the key architects of Vietnam escalation, later admitted in his memoir and in documentary footage that serious doubts about the August 4th attack existed almost immediately, and that those doubts were not shared with the American public. The war was expanded on the basis of a ghost attack, a manufactured crisis, a lie that cost tens of thousands of American lives and millions of Vietnamese lives. The people who called it a fabrication were called traitors. Decades later, the government's own classified documents confirmed they were right. In the mid-1960s, as the civil rights movement reached its peak, there were claims circulating, particularly in black communities, that the FBI was not a neutral law enforcement agency, that it was actively working to destabilize civil rights organizations, that it was surveilling, harassing, and attempting to neutralize black leaders. These claims were dismissed as paranoia by mainstream commentators. The FBI, after all, was supposed to be one of the good guys. What the Senate's Church Committee revealed in 1975 was almost incomprehensible in its scope. The FBI had been running a program called COINTELPRO, Counterintelligence Program, since 1956. It targeted not foreign adversaries, but domestic political organizations that J. Edgar Hoover deemed threatening. The targets included the Communist Party, the Socialist Workers' Party, the Puerto Rican Independence Movement, the American Indian Movement, the Women's Liberation Movement, the New Left, and most extensively and aggressively, the Civil Rights Movement and the Black Power Movement. What the FBI did to Martin Luther King Jr. specifically is worth dwelling on. The FBI conducted years of illegal wiretapping of King's phones, his hotel rooms, his offices, and his private conversations. Agents compiled extensive files on his personal life and used that material as a weapon. In November 1964, just weeks after King received the Nobel Peace Prize, the FBI mailed him an anonymous letter. It included recordings of his private activities and a message that ended as either a demand that he resign from public life or an encouragement to commit suicide. That letter was written by an FBI agent. It was approved by the FBI's Domestic Intelligence Division. J. Edgar Hoover had personally described Martin Luther King Jr. as the most dangerous Negro in America. COINTELPRO also targeted the Black Panther Party with deliberate disinformation campaigns designed to incite violence between rival groups, contributing to multiple deaths. It infiltrated organizations with informants who provoked illegal activity to justify prosecution. The Church Committee called these activities abuses of power that cannot be easily dismissed. The people who said the FBI was targeting black leaders and civil rights organizations were not paranoid. They were describing reality. In the early 2000s, economists, analysts, and housing market observers began raising alarms. The housing market was showing signs of a dangerous bubble. Mortgage-backed securities were being sold as low-risk investments when the underlying mortgages were anything but. Loans were being extended to borrowers with no income, no assets, and no ability to repay. And Wall Street banks were packaging those toxic loans, rating them AAA, and selling them to pension funds, insurance companies, and foreign governments around the world. When people raised these concerns, they were told they didn't understand how modern finance worked. That diversification made the system safe. That risk had been engineered out of the equation, that housing prices always went up. In September 2008, Lehman Brothers collapsed. The global financial system came within days, some argue hours, of complete seizure. The Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations spent 2 years examining what happened. In 2011, they released a 650-page report. Its conclusion was direct. The crisis was not an accident. It was the result of high-risk lending, regulatory failures, inflated credit ratings, and investment bank abuses. Goldman Sachs, the report found, had sold mortgage-related securities to clients while simultaneously betting against those same securities, in some cases specifically because they knew the securities were of poor quality. Documents uncovered by the subcommittee showed Goldman executives internally describing certain mortgage products they were selling to clients as crap and junk. The rating agencies had been assigning top ratings to mortgage-backed securities under competitive pressure from the banks that were paying their fees. The report described a race to the bottom in which agencies competed for business by offering favorable ratings. Nearly 10 million American families lost their homes. Trillions of dollars in retirement savings were wiped out. The U.S. unemployment rate doubled. And the banks that caused the crisis received $700 billion in taxpayer-funded bailouts. No senior Wall Street executive was criminally prosecuted. The people who said the financial system was rigged to benefit the banks, while ordinary people absorbed the losses, were not radicals. The Senate said the same thing in 650 pages of footnoted detail. In the early 1990s, Purdue Pharma launched a new painkiller. OxyContin was marketed with the explicit claim that its extended-release formulation made it less addictive than other opioids. Sales representatives were instructed to tell doctors that the risk of addiction from OxyContin was less than 1%. That figure had no basis in science. Internal documents would later confirm that Purdue knew early on that OxyContin was being crushed, dissolved, and injected for its euphoric effects, which meant their extended release claim was not functioning as marketed. They continued promoting the drug aggressively regardless. Purdue deployed the largest and most sophisticated pharmaceutical sales force in the country to push OxyContin. Doctors who wrote high-volume prescriptions were invited to all-expenses-paid medical conferences in resort locations. The company tracked prescribing patterns and targeted high-prescribing doctors for special attention. Sales reps were paid bonuses based on the volume of opioids prescribed in their territories. When addiction and overdose deaths began climbing, and when observers began connecting the dots between aggressive marketing and the crisis, the response from the pharmaceutical industry and its allies in government was to blame the patients. To frame addiction as a moral failing rather than a predictable pharmacological consequence of a deliberately overprescribed product. In 2021, Purdue Pharma pleaded guilty to federal criminal charges. The Sackler family, Purdue's owners, agreed to pay up to $6 billion in civil settlements. Court documents revealed the full scope of the scheme, how the company had known about misuse and addiction, how it had continued to market the drug aggressively, and how it had funneled billions in profits to family members while the company accumulated liability. The opioid crisis has now killed over 500,000 Americans. That number continues to climb. The people who said a pharmaceutical company was deliberately manufacturing addiction for profit were not cynics inventing dark fantasies. They were describing what was happening. So, here's where we are. The CIA was conducting illegal experiments on unsuspecting Americans. Confirmed. The NSA was conducting mass warrantless surveillance of American citizens. Confirmed. The tobacco industry knew cigarettes caused cancer and spent decades hiding it. Confirmed. The Gulf of Tonkin incident, the pretext for the Vietnam War, was fabricated. Confirmed. The FBI was running illegal programs to destroy the civil rights movement and its leaders. Confirmed. The financial crisis of 2008 was caused by deliberate fraud in the banking sector. Confirmed. A pharmaceutical company manufactured an opioid epidemic for profit. Confirmed. In every single one of these cases, everyone, the people who raised the alarm were dismissed, attacked, marginalized, or prosecuted. They were called paranoid. They were called dangerous. They were told they were embarrassing themselves. And in every single case, they were right. Now, I want to be careful here. I am not telling you to believe every claim that gets labeled a conspiracy theory. Most are wrong. Many are harmful. The label exists for a reason. Critical thinking matters. Evidence matters. The method by which you evaluate a claim matters enormously. But what these cases teach us, what they demand of us, is a different kind of skepticism than the one most of us were taught. We were taught to be skeptical of claims that challenge authority. But these cases reveal something more unsettling, that the official dismissal of a claim can itself be a weapon. That labeling something a conspiracy theory is one of the most effective tools available for burying an inconvenient truth. The question isn't whether conspiracy theories are ridiculous. Some of them are. Most of them, probably. The question is, who decides which ones? And if history tells us anything, it tells us this. The people with the most to lose from the truth being known are very often the loudest voices telling you the truth isn't worth looking for. Stay curious, stay skeptical, stay rigorous, and never stop asking questions. If this video made you think, the best thing you can do right now is share it. Not because I'm asking for a favor, but because the people in your life who need to see this probably won't go looking for it on their own. Hit the like button so this reaches more people, And if you're not subscribed to the Universal Explorer yet, now is the time. Click that subscribe button and hit the bell so you never miss what we uncover next. We're just getting started. Drop in the comments the theory you think belongs on this list, the one that hasn't been confirmed yet. I read everyone. Stay curious, stay skeptical, stay rigorous, and never stop asking questions.